What's good, Royal Family? It's Queen's Throne, and I'm back at you again for this time an edit. I might be doing premieres for a while, but today we're here to talk about the Kelli Bryant situation where she abandoned 3 of her children for some years, y'all. Now, I am kind of happy in this situation, even though Kelli's public defender was pushing for her to get released after the conditions of her home and the condition that she left her children in. The judge did grant her cash bond in the amount of $250 million. Now, again, I don't think that she should get out at any given time, and I really don't think that she will be able to get out with that type of bond needing to be posted for her to be released. However, let's go over a little bit of the case information. Now, Kelli Bryant, who is a mother of 3 children, ages 12, 13, and 15, was arrested due to 3 child abuse charges stemming from a February 14th event where her landlord, who hadn't gotten rent since October of last year, came to the residence where the children were and asked the police to do a welfare check on Kelli Bryant. Now, when they got to the house, the deputies and all that, they did not find Kelli Bryant, but they did find that the home was in very deplorable conditions. Trash was piled as high as 4 feet in some areas, and mold and human waste were also found throughout the home. Authorities also stated that the toilet was overflowing and was not in use, as well as there was human feces inside of the bathtub. As I stated, Kelli Bryant was not there, but they did find her 3 children who were wearing soiled clothing, and their hair was matted, as well as their fingernails and toenails were several inches long. Now, investigators learned that her son had slept on a mattress on the floor while her daughters allegedly slept on pizza boxes. The daughters were hiding in a bathroom that was filled with feces and piles of trash and completely non-functional, while her son was hiding in another room. Now, I gathered the information for this story so we can find out all the details to this case. Sources are saying that she allegedly dropped off food, definitely very sparingly. Some say once a week, but I heard something about that a loaf of bread was dropped off and the children were to consume that over the next few days. Remember, these are 3 children. And what were they supposed to put on this bread, y'all? Then another thing is that the mother was in the area of the children that she left abandoned in this home, about a 6-minute drive. I think that's crazy, y'all. Let's get into the details of this case, and I will see you on the other side. Let's go.
Well, Oakland County Sheriff Michael Bouchard spoke to me earlier today and told me he has never encountered a situation like this before throughout his entire career, where children have been abandoned and left alone in such terrible conditions for over 4 years.
The home the children were found in didn't have working bathrooms. Now, the sheriff's office says in the home, trash had piled up 4 feet high.
They basically were locked in a home without anybody knowing they were there and surviving in conditions that animal rights and animal welfare wouldn't tolerate.
After a landlord on the 600 block of Lydia Lane in Pontiac called deputies Friday after not hearing from the mother and owner of this townhome for months, deputies inspected the residence and found 3 children, a 15-year-old boy, a 13-year-old girl, and a 12-year-old girl, alone and abandoned.
They had not been in school years. They had not seen other adults. You know, the young girls hadn't seen their mother for a number of years. You know, they were sleeping on pizza boxes on the floor.
These are the images the sheriff's office released of inside the home, where they reported seeing mold and human waste throughout, garbage piled as high as 4 feet in some rooms, and an overflowing toilet. I spoke to a woman who lives in the neighborhood and is on an HOA subcommittee for the community. She told me her phone was blowing up with people expressing shock and sadness throughout the day.
Everybody's upset. Everybody's upset about it. Like, oh my God, this is right in our neighborhood. How could something like this happen? These children, how could people go living every day and not see something like this and report it sooner?
The 3 children were reportedly wearing soiled clothing and had matted hair and toenails that were several inches long when found. They were taken to the hospital for evaluation Friday and have since been placed in the custody of a relative by Child Protective Services. Now, as the investigation begins, there are a lot of unanswered questions that need to be answered, like how any neighbor, Child Protective Services, or the public schools here in Pontiac didn't know about these children or do anything about it over the past few years.
The mother of three, Kelli Bryant, has been charged with 3 counts of child abuse. That's the most serious charge in child abuse cases. If convicted, she could face up to life in prison.
Plenty of responsibility to go around for how this was allowed to happen. However, these 3 kids were entrusted to the care of their mother, Kelli Bryant, and the evidence suggests that she effectively abandoned them to a revolting pit of refuse and squalor.
Deputies were called to the home on Lydia Lane on February 14th. What they found inside that home was horrifying. Human waste in overflowing toilets, mold, and garbage in massive piles. The children were covered in feces, and the 2 girls, ages 13 and 12, had trouble walking out of the house. The 15-year-old boy would contact Bryant when their food supply was running low. At the hospital, the children failed to do basic tasks like flushing the toilet and brushing their teeth.
These kids, not to have even basic hygiene tools, and I guess what stands out the most for me is no love.
Now, at this time, the prosecutor's office has not been presented with a request for criminal charges against any other person. McDonald says they will be asking the Department of Health and Human Services to have Bryant's paternal rights terminated. Now, Bryant remains in custody, and she is expected to be arraigned on those charges in court tomorrow.
But the mother still would not allow him to see the kids. So that's what we've learned so far, at least preliminarily. We're going to go back and double check all these timelines and that kind of information. So he, in essence, had lost contact with the kids.
A 34-year-old Pontiac mother is now in custody. Oakland County authorities say they found her 3 children living at a home in deplorable shape. The conditions included everything from mold to garbage piled as high as 4 feet.
The mother is currently in custody, but they've yet to charge her with anything. They're still processing the reality of what these 3 kids have been going through the past 4.5 years. These are just a few of the images that only begin to describe the condition of the unit these kids aged 15, 13, and 12 were living in. Sheriff Michael Bouchard says the community already donated so many clothes, hygiene items, and other necessities that they're now turning the focus to financial donations, which he says are already up to $15,000 to $20,000. Bouchard says the father was in jail during the summer of 2020, the time they believe the children were first abandoned, and while a consent agreement was executed in 2022 for him to see his kids, the mother allegedly didn't allow any contact between them. He says conversations with these kids revealed the 2 youngest ones never left the house during this entire period of time, and the oldest only went outside twice.
Once because he wanted to feel the grass, which by itself is heartbreaking, and a second time to check the mail. You wouldn't do this to an animal, let alone your child.
Residents in Pontiac are reeling after investigators arrested a 34-year-old mother who's accused of abandoning her 3 children in a filthy home.
Just days after Oakland County sheriffs found 3 children living in deplorable conditions, the community stepped up, offering to help. Over the weekend, deputies were called to the 600 block of Lydia Lane after a landlord reported not hearing from the children's mother since December and feared that something may have happened. When they arrived, they found the home in terrible shape, with an overflowing toilet, mold and human waste throughout, and some rooms with garbage in piles 4 feet high. Among the squalor, deputies found 3 children at the home, a 15-year-old boy, a 13-year-old girl, and a 12-year-old girl, who were wearing soiled clothing with matted hair and toenails that were several inches long. In a statement, Pontiac School's interim superintendent, Dr. Kimberly Leverett, said, quote, "The Pontiac community has been shaken by the horrifying story of the 3 children who were discovered suffering from extreme neglect this past weekend. As a school district, we are working with the Oakland County Sheriff's Department to assist in any way we can. As educators, our hearts are breaking for these children and what they have endured over the past several years. We are grateful to the Oakland County Sheriff's Department, the Oakland County prosecutor, and all who are working on investigating and prosecuting this case. Investigators say they were taken to the hospital for evaluation and are now in the custody of relatives."
That's where that stood. So we've had questions about that. The other questions that we've had was who were the other people potentially dropping food at the house other than the mother. So far, again, the investigation is pretty layered and complex given that it's going over years. But it appears those are companies like an Instacart or a DoorDash, things like that. So, so far, none of the people that were coming to the house had any awareness that there were kids inside or the situation in which they were delivering to. Obviously, the question was somebody dropping food off knowing there's kids there? No information at this point leads us to believe that. The kids were forensically interviewed with our partners at Care House. They've already been seen once at McLaren. We intend to have them at a much more detailed, both physical and mental health kind of checkup, if you will, that will happen hopefully this week. When our detectives saw them at their interview at Care House, they were already making amazing progress, having had some tender love, having had some supportive care, having been put in new clothing and some basic hygiene. The one detective said that the little girl was talking quite a bit. So that's super exciting to see that happening. As it relates to being in the house, the only one of the three that ever came out was the young boy, and he came out twice. Once because he wanted to feel the grass by itself is heartbreaking, and a second time to check the mail. So you wouldn't do this to an animal, let alone your child. So, just to hear that he came out to touch the grass is just crushing, soul crushing on so many levels. As it relates to the house, you've already seen some of these pictures. So inside of the home, as I had mentioned with these pictures, trash was piled, in some places 3 and 4 foot high. Everything was covered with feces and trash. The toilet had become non-functional, and the bathtub was filled with feces. That's the kind of situation these poor kids had been living in for years, not just hours or days, for years. And so when you have the complete lack of hygiene, a complete breakdown of basic living conditions that they were subjected to get a little deeper into that, detectives have narrowed down the initial abandonment they believe to be somewhere in the spring to summer of 2020. COVID played a little part in the disconnect potentially with schools and school communications. In 2020, the mother dropped off some trash bags, gloves, and Febreze, and that was about the last thing related to hygiene. 2020. In the height of COVID, okay? Towards the end, the children apparently were getting a loaf of bread dropped off that was intended to last 3 to 4 days. Obviously, on so many levels, the conditions are horrendous. So what we're trying to do in the meantime, and as it relates specifically to the case, the preliminary report has been turned over to the prosecutor. We're adding some more stuff for them. They're in the process of determination. When I heard about this, I called her on the weekend and let it know it was coming, and she has her staff queued up, and they're in that process. As it relates to the kids, the first thing we wanted to do is obviously get them safe and to get them clean and get them enclosed. I will say we have one of the most generous communities, I think, in the world. 3-4 years that they've been subjected to these conditions. So it's hard to wrap your head around this one. So there's going to be a lot of long-term, I think, mental health and educational needs and things that we want to try to help with the family to get to that point. The other thing I'd like to mention, the family, some of the folks that are now involved with the kids that didn't know, that's another question we've asked. They didn't know what was going on with the kids. They had been told by her that somebody else was babysitting the children or other kinds of things. So they were unaware what was happening so far, according to our investigation. All of us are asking, how the heck did this happen? How did we lose 3 kids? How did they fall through the system? The community, the relatives, the schools, how did no one know? And we examined the school code, and there's some gaps that we think in part allowed this to happen. And so what we're going to suggest is there needs to be some changes in state law. Right now, basically, there is no specific duty required that is triggered by certain actions. So what I mean by that is a school district, in this case, received a request for records from another school in Pontiac, but no verification the children ever moved to that school. And so at some point, when they didn't show up, they were just dropped off the enrollment of the school that sent the transcripts. So no one knew that they were nowhere. And so what we're proposing, and we're already communicating to a potential bill sponsor, is some amendments to the school code that will close that communication gap so that before a child is unenrolled, They have to obtain written confirmation that child's someplace else. That doesn't happen now. And that's what happened here, it appears. It's still, again, being investigated because we're going back years and trying to check records. But it looks like based on that request for records, neither of them knew where that child was and presumed, I guess, that the other one had the children. The other thing, this is the specific language, but it goes into basically filling that gap, closing that hole so that if a child doesn't show up at a school for a period of time, then it triggers a follow-up where they have to communicate with either a truancy officer or law enforcement to begin an examination of what happened to these kids. Where are they? You know, it's unbelievable to think that we've got 3 kids that fell off everybody's map for years. So that goes to the second part, as I said, within 20 days, the sending school that sent those records has to notify the truancy officer if they have not received written confirmation that that child is someplace else safe. So it shortens the window. First trigger is 10 days, second trigger is 20 days. We're just suggesting there's got to be some accountability measures so we don't have kids fall through the cracks in such a horrific way. As I said, we're going to have some follow-up investigative things we're going to be doing. We're going to check much more deeply the children's physical and mental well-being. Obviously, we're going to need to get an educational assessment on where they are. Without any education for a period of years, you know, you hear how many kids across this country fell way behind from 1 year of COVID. Imagine where these kids are. And so we don't have a clue. Where are they educationally in terms of acuity and also mental health and all the developmental things that happen in those critical years? You know, we don't know. And they're going to have needs with that. So it's a big undertaking, a big process, and one of the most tragic long-term abuse situations I've ever seen. I've been in this a long time. So that's kind of where we sit. Questions?
What did mom say or do to make her children so scared of leaving the house for years?
They were just scared. I don't know that she said anything particular that she's admitted to us, but they were afraid to leave. I know that much.
What's the latest with mom? I know the prosecutor's looking at this, but where is she? What's going on?
She's in custody with us.
Is she cooperating?
Yeah, I mean, she's talking to us, but we've got some follow-up secondary things that we want to ask her based on more information that's come to our attention since this originally surprisingly came to our attention when we were thinking we were going to check on her welfare and found 3 kids.
Any idea on the state of her mental health?
I have no information or background that she's got any mental health challenges, but obviously that will be all part of the case.
What about the landlord? Usually when you're renting, the landlord or somebody will come in and do a maintenance check. What are they saying?
The landlord's the one that actually called in a welfare check. You know, he said he hadn't heard from who he thought was the tenant for a period of time, and she hadn't paid her rent since October. So, I mean, typically a landlord would respond if there's complaints about something not working, but he was unaware of any of this. He actually sent us there to check on what he thought was his tenant, and that's when we found the kids.
And what's going to happen to that apartment or that townhouse right now? I mean, is it dangerous for the people that are, you know, next door? It's a kind of compact area.
Yeah, that will probably be up to the health department and other folks that will have to make a determination of how they move that forward. I mean, when we process that scene for evidentiary value, our folks were wearing hazmat suits. I mean, on every level, it's a biohazard.
Do we know where she was living while they were living there?
Elsewhere in Pontiac.
Like a friend's house? Was it a family member?
Who was she living with?
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably won't get into that at this point.
It seems just kind of elaborate that she'd go to all these lengths trying to hide it from her family and all this. I mean, what stands out about this to you, Sheriff?
Yeah, I mean, the complexity of it, the length of it, I mean, on so many levels, it's just hard, again, to wrap your head around. If you don't want to be a parent, you know, then there's mechanisms in place. There's methodologies to either give your child up for adoption or to other family members. There's never an excuse to abuse your child or abandon your kids. There just isn't. There's so many people that are just wanting a child in their life out there. And I know there's, you know, a lot of kids that haven't been adopted, but anything's better than this. You know, if that's not in your wheelhouse to be a parent, then, you know, let someone else have a chance at that role.
The mother accused of abandoning her children for several years will be in court today. 34-year-old Kelli Bryant is charged with 3 counts of first-degree child abuse. The siblings, who are 15, 13, and 12, were found last week living in filthy conditions. Neighbors we talked to were stunned.
People ask me, well, you didn't smell anything? No, I didn't smell anything. I had no idea.
Prosecutors believe Bryant abandoned her 3 kids sometime between 2020 and 2021. Police say they survived on food Bryant or a stranger would drop off on the front porch of this housing complex in Pontiac. Police say Bryant's son would text her when their food was running low.
First, I'd like to announce that we have authorized 3 charges of first-degree child abuse against Kelli Bryant, a 34-year-old resident of Pontiac. My office has already advised the court in the neglect proceedings that we will be asking to terminate the defendant's parental rights. In every case of child abuse, my office focuses first and foremost on the best interest of the child or children and on holding those responsible for abuse accountable. The 3 children in this case suffered unimaginable abuse and neglect over a long period of time. Thankfully, they've now been rescued from that, and our first priority has been and will continue to be their safety and well-being. I want to briefly address, though, why we're here. Since the first announcement over the weekend by the sheriff, this case has captured the attention of the people across our community, our county, our state, and even internationally, because people are rightfully concerned about the welfare of these children. And we're holding this press conference because, like all other decisions, we balance the interests of public safety, media attention and inquiries, and balancing everyone's right to a fair trial, which is why the events and facts that are disclosed here today are strictly confined to what's already been placed on the record in the swear-to this morning in the 50th District Court. When their circumstances became public, including the photos of the home, although law enforcement did not identify the defendant, she was quickly identified on social media and also has been reported in other news media outlets, which is why we are naming her today. We have recently, luckily, been fortunate enough to, for the first time ever, hire our public information officer, Jeff Watruck, is in the back of the room. Many of you have already spoken to and will continue to, and we're lucky to have him. The children are currently staying with a relative. All 3 children received immediate medical attention at a local hospital, and they were interviewed by trained forensic interviewers at Care House. Considering what they've experienced, they appear to be doing okay. Obviously, the trauma here is significant, and my office, including our victim services section, will make sure these children are supported during this process. Today, the charges are 3 counts of child abuse in the first degree. This is the most serious charge for child abuse, and if convicted, Ms. Bryant could face a sentence of up to life in prison. This morning, on the record, it was stated that in 2019, suspect Kelli Bryant was living at the home, which I'm not disclosing the address at this time, in Pontiac, Michigan, with her 4 children. At some point between 20 and 2021, the suspect moved out of her home, leaving 3 of her children abandoned in that location, while 1 of her children went to live with their father. On February 14th, 2025, police were called to the home by the landlord. Police learned that the landlord was concerned for the welfare of Ms. Bryant, who had not paid rent on the property since October of 2024. Police entered with the landlord and discovered her 3 children, ages 12, 13, and 15. Her daughters were hiding in a bathroom that was filled with feces, piles of trash, and completely non-functional, while her son was hiding in another room. Police were astonished to find anyone in the location because it appeared to be uninhabitable, with piles of garbage and refuse several feet high, including large amounts of human excrement. The children were afraid to come out of their hiding places and to speak with the police. Police had to repeatedly advise the children that they were there to help and they were safe. The children's bodies and clothing were covered in feces, and the girls had difficulty physically walking outside of the residence. In addition to the physical difficulty, they appeared to be and were immediately overstimulated upon leaving the residence. All 3 children were transported via ambulance to the hospital and showed signs of severe neglect. At the hospital, the children struggled with completing basic hygiene tasks like flushing a toilet and brushing their teeth because they had not done it in years. The children were forensically interviewed and described having virtually no physical contact with their mother, suspect Bryant, or the outside world in several years. The girls had not left the residence in several years, and her son had only left the home to go into the yard approximately 2 times, never venturing away from the house more than to check the mailbox. During his interview, her son stated that he would text their mother when their food supply was running low, and she would have food delivered to the residence. The children shared that during the years they were concealed in the home, suspect Bryant failed to provide toilet paper shower, soap, or shampoo. The defendant instructed the kids that they were not to answer the door or leave the house. All three children expressed fear about what their mother's response would be if they left the home. Defendant concealed the children from family and friends and lied about who was caring for the kids and their whereabouts. The defendant took the active steps of lying and concealing to make sure the children went undiscovered, and she took these actions knowing that her children would suffer serious physical and emotional harm as a result. And again, these are allegations. I personally viewed the videos and images and was struck at what a difficult situation it was. At present, we've not been presented with a request for criminal charges against any other individuals. That does not mean that won't happen in the future. I just can't speak to it at this point. Morally, there is plenty of responsibility to go around for how this was allowed to happen. However, these three kids were entrusted to the care of their mother, Kelli Bryant, and the evidence suggests that she effectively abandoned them to a revolting pit of refuse and squalor. There must be consequences for those actions. The defendant is presently in custody. The three children in this case were interviewed at Care House. These kids were interviewed in a safe environment by an experienced, trained forensic interviewer, and these interviews are important in all child abuse cases. They allow each child the chance to tell us their story without the influence of the abuser and without using leading questions that could taint their testimony. If you suspect a child is abused or neglected, you too can report this to CPS, and I urge anyone who suspects that a child is being abused or neglected to report that. We need to make sure that every child is safe and well cared for. These charges, again, are only allegations, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. We see time and time again, victims of severe abuse of all ages make decisions that don't seem reasonable to us. And what we know is that that's very common. And there's a multitude of reasons why they didn't leave the home. We just don't know that yet. I think it's already public record that of the four kids, there are two fathers. This is the worst I've ever seen, and I've stopped saying that because every time I say that, I see something worse. It was unbelievable what they were living with for years. Unbelievable. It wouldn't be surroundings where you would want any living creature living in, creature or animal, or particularly human beings. I mean, these kids, not to have even basic hygiene tools. And I guess what stands out the most for me is no love. There was nobody there to care for them for between 3 and 4 years. No parent, nobody physically present to let them know that they were safe and they were loved. Yes?
Did she have any prior contact with CPS or a prior criminal record?
I can't comment on that. All the children had access to the phones. They all had their own phones. According to the evidence that's been placed on the record, there was no physical contact whatsoever. I don't think it's accurate to say that they had food dropped off weekly. Sometimes it was longer than that. I believe there was heat enough so that the children were at least able to live there. If not, as you know, given the cold temperatures, there would have been signs of freezing to death.
Where was she staying?
I don't have that information. Not there. And the thing that I want to stress here is that we are responsible for prosecuting all of the criminal cases in this county. We're also responsible for representing the Department of Health and Human Services in child abuse and neglect proceedings. So we are simultaneously prosecuting the criminal case against mom and the neglect proceeding pertaining to the kids. So we will be asking our client, the Department of Health and Human Services, to file a petition to terminate her rights. So there's just a lot we can't really get into, except I do want to say that our client, the Department of Health and Human Services, their number one priority is the care and welfare of children, and wherever they are placed, they do their due diligence to make sure that is a safe placement. They are in the care and custody of the Department of Health and Human Services, and they are placed through DHHS with a relative placement. The custody remains with DHHS until otherwise determined by the court.
All right, back on the record with the Kelli Bryant matter. For the record, Ms. Carrigan, I know you've had an opportunity to go into a private confidential breakout room to confer with your client regarding the charges in this matter. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, I did.
And are you waiving the reading of the general information and complaint this morning?
Yes, Your Honor, waive reading, stand mute, ask the judge to not guilty plea on her behalf. I did advise her of the nature of the offenses, the maximum possible penalties, as well as gave her basic constitutional rights.
All right, this matter is hereby assigned to Honorable Judge Cynthia Walker. She will be back before her on for a probable cause conference March 4th, 2025, for a probable cause conference with an exam date set for March 11th. 2025. Ms. Bryant, that exam date is a tentative date depending upon everyone's schedule, but by the court rule, we have to set a date to keep it going. That will be at 9 o'clock. The PCC, the probable cause conference, is at 1:30. Of course, if you're unable to retain an attorney, and a court-appointed attorney will be provided for you to help you navigate and to communicate before Judge Walker on your next court date in this matter. Pretrial services relative to bond, but for the record, Ms. Carragher, are you in receipt of the pretrial services report bail recommendation in this matter?
I am, yes.
Okay. And have you read and reviewed that?
I did do that in the breakout room, Your Honor. Sorry, there's a lot of feedback, I think, from the jail screen. I think that's our problem.
Yeah, our problem is from the
I
jail
did review
screen.
it, and I talked to her.
Okay. All right. So they're recommending release with conditions in this matter. We're going to go from there. We have the PCC date. I'm going to have you speak to bond, and then I'll make my decision as to bond. And I'll also have prosecution speak to bond. Ms. Carragher, you're asking the court to accept the recommendation as provided by pretrial services?
I am, Your Honor. MCR 6.106, if you go through those conditions, provide that a personal recognizance bond with any conditions should be provided unless Ms. Bryant fell under some of the very specified exceptions to a personal bond that are listed. The court can also provide a cash bond if the court finds that Ms. Bryant is either a risk to the community or a flight risk. This particular case is serious, and we're not denying that it's a very serious case. However, I don't believe that the facts and circumstances of the case give any indication that Ms. Bryant is a risk to the community at large. In addition to that, there is no indication that Ms. Bryant is a flight risk. She's a lifelong resident of the county. She was residing within the city limits of this community. She, was employed, and she has ties to the community. In speaking to her, she also is asking that the court consider a tether, which could be part of a bond if the people had any concerns that she posed a flight risk. I do think, the recommendation from pretrial services is in line with the Michigan court rules, understanding that it is a very serious offense, but the court rules are what they are. And they do provide that Ms. Bryant should be released in a personal bond with conditions. So that's what I'm asking the court to do.
Ms. Green, would you like to address the court regarding bond in this matter? Mute the jail. I'm going to mute the jail camera. And go ahead, Ms. Green.
Thank you. I did have the opportunity to review the pretrial services report. I know that Your Honor just listened to the swear-to facts yesterday, and I'm sure that those are fresh in your memory. I am requesting in this case, I do agree with Ms. Kirandango regarding MCR 6.106 to the extent that you may not deny bond, but this court has the authority to put in place a high cash bond with conditions, and I believe that it appears that Ms. Bryant is not employed and that her resident status may be transient. So I consider her, and I think that the facts of this case portray her as a potential flight risk, and that there are 3 victims in this case that she should absolutely be prohibited from having contact with. So I'd ask that the court add a specific no contact provision as it relates to the 3 minor victims in this case. And if the court would like me to go on, I can.
No. What I found very suspicious in the report of pretrial services, there's 2 different addresses given to her. So I agree with you, Ms. Green, that one could opine that she's transient. She's from here, she's from there. We don't know where she resides. I do find her an acute risk and danger to the community and to any minor children under the age of 18, let alone the 3 minor children that she is a mother to. With that in mind, I agree with Ms. Carragher. I cannot deny her bond. That is court, of course. My first knee-jerk reaction was to deny her bond. However, because I find her acute danger, I find her a continued danger to the children. My main concern is, I don't know who, if anyone, that the children have been given to. If it is a family member, I'm concerned that she still may have contact with the family member from the jail with instructions to continue to engage in fear tactics to forbid the children from cooperating with authorities in their continued investigation in this matter. For that reason alone, I'm giving her a $250 million bond in this matter, cash only. The other aspects, should she post that bond, she is not to have any contact with these children by family members, third-party agents, or friends. So, Ms. Bryant, I want you to understand, any phone calls from the jail, should you're unable to post this bond, is recorded. Should the court find out that you are sending messages to engage in further fear tactics and intimidation of the children, your phone privileges will be removed. You're not to have, in fact, any contact should you post this bond with any children under the age of 18. In this matter, if you post this bond, you should be supervised by pretrial services, no alcohol or drugs, no weapons or firearms, and a GPS tether with a verified address, because I'm concerned pretrial services has indicated 2 different reported addresses for you. I don't believe anyone knows where you have been staying, madam. There's no consistent history. Anything further regarding the bond, Ms. Caragongo, Ms. Green?
Just ever so briefly, they had no issues finding my client to arrest her. So I just want the record to be clear on that.
Ms. Green?
Your Honor, you have before you information that the defendant has been lying about her whereabouts, the whereabouts regarding what she was telling where the children were. So you have a lot on this record in terms of inconsistencies with her location and the information that she's given to put in place the high cash bond.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your cooperation in this matter. Ms. Bryant, you are thanked and excused from the camera. Ms. Caragongo, Ms. Green, thank you so much. Pretrial service, thank you so much. Ma'am, can you get up and let the deputies know we're ready for the next defendant? Thank you.
But we begin tonight with questions still swirling regarding 3 children that investigators say were abandoned for years inside a Pontiac home. Where was the mom living that whole time?
Now, Kelli Bryant is facing federal charges of child abuse after investigators discovered her children living in filth and squalor for years. And today, our team found out where Bryant may have been living.
And a neighbor who says he actually had interactions with the kids before.
Up until this point, many of us believed that the 3 children living in this home had no contact with anyone except for their mother for nearly 5 years. Well, today we learned that at least a handful of times they did call out to a neighbor.
Was it just that one time?
Maybe 2 or 3 times. A father himself, Jamar Johnson, tells me he felt the need to share that he heard the 3 kids abandoned in squalor in this Pontiac home. For 6 months, he has lived 2 doors down, and occasionally they yelled out their window to him.
They say, hey, nice car, but, and I might wave back at them, but that's it. There's no way that I could have known that they were in a terrible situation.
Johnson says, how could he know that the room the children were calling from was stacked 4 feet high with mold, feces, and trash? He says he never saw them outside, but he saw their mother, 34-year-old Kelli Marie Bryant.
She would be outside for hours and hours with a friend.
Johnson says Bryant was always in a car with a friend. He never saw her go inside, and he wonders who was that friend? Did they know who Bryant was hiding?
She's from here, she's from there. We don't know where she resides.
So many have been wondering where Bryant herself lived while her children sat in isolation. Court documents show 2 addresses. At one of them, I talked to a woman who confirmed Bryant was living here.
Were you guys living together?
Yeah. The house is about 6 minutes away from where Bryant's children were. The woman behind the door telling me that Bryant always told them the kids were with their dad, and Bryant actually played with other people's kids. The 3 children, ages 15, 13, and 12, are currently staying with their maternal grandpa. Over the phone, their paternal grandpa, Samuel White, tells me he and the kids' father have been trying to see the kids for years.
But it just hurt because it's not the fact that she had to take them to that. Why would she do that and that wasn't the situation?
White says that he personally asked Bryant to bring the kids around. The answer was always no, begging the final question, and perhaps the biggest question, alone. Why would she do this? How are you guys coping with that?
I mean, it's sickening because it was like we wasn't running from the situation. We always asked about them. They doing all right, but it's a lot of scar there. It's a lot of scars.
Bryant will be back in court March 4th for a probable cause conference.
The mother charged in that horrible case of child neglect in a Pontiac isn't going to be leaving the Oakland County lockup anytime soon.
No, and that's because her arraignment today, Kelli Bryant was given a $250 million cash bond. It's rare to see a judge set a bond that high in a child abuse case.
Yeah, Ty, it's totally rare that we see a bond amount this high, but we think that the judge definitely proved her point. This is likely something that this defendant may not be able to pay whatsoever.
I'm giving her a $250 million bond. Cash only.
It's going to now take $250 million in cash for 34-year-old Kelli Marie Bryant to get out of jail as she waits to go on trial for the neglect of her 3 children she allegedly left on their own for years.
My first knee-jerk reaction was to deny her bond. I find her a continued danger to the children.
There's no telling just how long it's going to take for crews to clean up the deplorable conditions the kids were living in. We saw several people doing the job today in hazmat suits.
It's just terrible. It's no words. There's no words that I could say for something like this, a condition like this. There's no words I could say.
Prior to the bond amount being named, Bryant's court-appointed attorney tried her best to argue that her client was not a flight risk or a danger to the public.
She's a lifelong resident of the county. She was residing within the city limits of this community.
While Bryant looked off screen for most of the conversation, ultimately it was decided by the judge the main reason for the high bond amount was the chance of Bryant physically getting into contact with the kids while they're with relatives.
I'm concerned that she still may have contact with a family member from the jail with instructions to continue to engage in fear tactics to forbid the children from cooperating with authorities in their continued investigation in this matter.
Now, if Bryant is somehow able to come up with that $250 million bond, she's going to be ordered to wear a tether. She's also not supposed to have any type of contact with those kids at all, let alone any minor. But the cleanup still continues at that home, and we'll have more on what that process is like.
The investigation continues into Kelli Bryant, the woman accused of abandoning her children for years. In the meantime, crews have started the long process of cleaning out that townhome that those children were in.
Well, I spoke to some of the people who were tasked with cleaning out this townhome behind me, and they told me they've never seen anything like it before.
There was species everywhere. Everywhere. On the walls, wiped on the walls. The toilet was like filled up this much.
Cleaners spent all day Friday inside of the townhome on Lydia Lane in Pontiac, where the Oakland County Sheriff's Office says 3 children spent almost every single second inside of for over 4 years while they were abandoned from their mother. And the condition the residence was in is what Sheriff Michael Bouchard describes as deplorable.
I never seen nothing like this before. You know, how could someone do something to kids like that? Treat them just like a dog, you know, it's just terrible.
I spoke to a woman who lives about 10 doors down in the same complex, who told me she's still in shock, and that after living in foster care herself, she's astonished these 3 children were allegedly abandoned for so long without anyone finding out.
It's tragic, it really is. It's been about 4 years, so they were a lot younger when this started, and just the fact that their mom shows up once a week to give them a little bit of food with no hygiene products or anything, it's going to have a lot of long-term lasting effects on them.
Lovegrove also mentioned the confusion herself, much like many others are feeling, about how the neighbors that shared walls with the abandoned children didn't smell or notice anything off.
Honestly, something like that's going to penetrate. I smell sometimes people cooking in their own places, so the fact that their neighbors didn't notice anything, there were no kind of rodent problem or anything that they were noticing, is very shocking.
Bryant is now being detained on a $250 million cash bond.
Ultimately, I am happy that these children are alive. I know that they suffered very harsh conditions and neglect and, let's be real, abuse, right? Hence her being charged, Kelli Bryant being charged with 3 counts of child abuse, which carries a up to life sentence. I hope that the judge that does oversee this case is very harsh in sentencing. I also hope this goes to trial because more information will come out. And the reason why I want more information to come out is so that we can prevent this from happening to any other children. I think that this mother is literally disgusting. And I don't mean to be petty, and I don't got obviously an issue with women wearing wigs or whatever, but I noticed that in her booking photo, she had what appeared to me to be a lace front wig on. Again, I don't have a problem with women wearing wigs. I wear them myself sometimes. However, I'm concerned about the fact that she has a lace front wig and her children are struggling to even survive. Now, I hope that she won't be able to post bond. I think that she won't be able to post bond, period, because $250 million cash bond that's a lot of money is definitely high. And in this case and situation, as you heard from the judge, they have to put a bail on it. And I salute that judge for putting such a high bail on this woman that I guess wants to get out so she can do what? The fact that the public defender of Kelli Bryant was literally sitting up there, you know, advocating for her client to be released, talking about how she's not a flight risk and she's not a danger to the community. First off, she's a danger to her own children, so you can never put anything past somebody like that and it being a danger to the community. Also, you heard in the audio that Kelli Bryant, while she was living at a friend's house 6 minutes away, far as a drive from the home where her children were living in these deplorable conditions, she was playing with other people's children. While at the same time neglected her very own. I do not really believe or understand how this went uncharted far as the children not being in school and this whole loophole that the sheriff was talking about towards the beginning. But I think that it's very alarming that such loophole even exists. I do understand that this situation did happen during COVID. However, it's heartbreaking to say the least. I also think that it's wild that, you know, Kelli Bryant has 2 baby fathers, but she kept her children away from the other baby's father. I think that that's just ultimately crazy. If you didn't want to take care of your own children, then why not allow this man to be some type of father in his children's life? More than just the mother in this situation is at fault for this. Of course, you heard the county and the prosecutor, whatever, try to minimize it a little bit or whatever, but I feel like it seems like a lot of the times anyway that CPS does a lot for children sometimes that maybe need just, you know, some other type of resources, or the parents need some type of resources and not a full removal. But in other cases, they totally dropped the ball in this situation. Notice that the prosecutor did not want to respond when one of the reporters in the audience asked her, were there any prior CPS calls before? I think that's very telling as well. I would be very surprised to understand that there were no CPS calls. However, them withholding information, I can tell you, is normal in situations. They do it for a reason, to protect the whole case so that they can secure this woman, you know, is found guilty, and basically, essentially, I hope they throw the book at her. But ultimately, I'm glad that the children are getting donations. They did raise between, at the time of these news clips, $15,000 and $20,000. I'm sure it's risen beyond that. I did see where clothing and all type of other things were donated to the children. I did hear somewhere where they were talking about getting a trust fund for the children and things like that. Ultimately, I think that the least that this county can do for these children is foot the bill for any mental health counseling that they need and medical at the end of the day. But ultimately, I'm interested in how she was paying rent for this apartment, and was she paying rent at where she was living with this friend, and was this the same friend that she was outside of the residence with on several occasions, like the man said. I'm interested in seeing, was she on any type of assistance, food stamps, Section 8, or housing, because that would give us the understanding to where possibly the county may have messed up even more when it comes to these children. Also, you guys remember that this happened during COVID, so I'm pretty sure she got stimulus for her and her 3 children, which is also alarming at the end of the day. Overall, I'm disgusted, which is really going to cause me to do a little story time with y'all today. Let's go. There's a reason why the Kelli Bryant case has really, really bothered me, and I'm about to explain that to you now. Now, no, in no way, shape, or form am I comparing what I'm about to tell you to Kelli Bryant's case and the fact that she abandoned her children. However, it definitely inspired me to do this video. Now, y'all know I do videos like this on bad moms, bad fathers, bad whatever, but this story right here bothered me on a few levels. Not just a story in the media, but around the time of this story coming out, I found out that something like this was actually going on with somebody that I knew. And the most heartbreaking part is somebody that my children knew. So shortly after my last live stream, a whole bunch of situations unfolded, and it was definitely concerning. Okay, now basically, to give you the rundown, one of my younger children has a best friend that they've known almost all of their life, and this best friend's mother had abandoned the child that I'm talking about, as well as another sibling. Now, of course, I've known of the mother for years. We really didn't have a really close relationship. However, since this child is close to one of my children, I saw this child often, and, we often took care of this child. Which, kind of happens, I guess, to some degree. My house is oftentimes a second home to some children, And if you know me, you know that I like my children to be at home versus sleeping over at a friend's house or whatever. So oftentimes my kids' friends would be over here, including the child that I'm talking about. But far as what I knew of this mother, over the years, she was a hardworking single woman whose baby's father is currently in prison. However, about 3 months ago, I noticed that it would be harder and harder to get her on the phone regarding her child. And I also noticed that she would not pick her child up when she had stated that she would be back to pick him up. Ultimately, I thought I was helping a single mother that was struggling with raising her children, and since this is a 2-parent household, I thought that, everything would be okay. I never thought that ultimately she would abandon her child or children. So around about a few days after my last live, the child was staying at my house for, I want to say, 5 days, right? And I asked him, after I, again, could not get a hold of his mother, this time 4 days, of course, right? I asked him, what was going on and things like that. And that is when he broke down and told me that prior to him coming back to my house for the 5 days, he had not seen his mother in days before that. So y'all know me, right? And how I feel about children and their safety and things like that. So of course I reached out to the mother. First, I'm trying to be understanding and everything like that, like what is going on, because again, this is totally out of character for this mother. Besides her behavior over the last few months, I've never seen her maneuver like this until it eventually, like I said, ramped up to where it was harder to communicate or even get her on the phone or even, have her to get the child. So I had reached out to her. She actually picked up after a couple of rings. And again, I'm being understanding, trying to get to the bottom of whatever's going on. I'm offering her any type of help that I possibly can, into which she replies to me, "Fuck them kids." And my jaw just dropped. She stated that the kids were not her concern and then just hung up. I cannot imagine being a mother myself ever saying fuck my kids and, going on and living life with no issue. But that was her take on it. Of course, I contacted the authorities because I was concerned about the welfare of this child. I've covered cases like Kelli Bryant, the woman that abandoned her 3 children. For years now, I've covered these type of cases, and I didn't want anything unfortunate to happen to him or his sibling. And since this child had no family or anybody else besides the mother, so long story short, the mother was arrested before CPS could get to her. She was found with drugs and paraphernalia on her. I went up to the jail to speak with her because, of course, now she can't hang up the phone or, So the mother stated that she wanted me to have temporary custody of him and basically stated that I could raise him until he's an adult. Which floored me at the time. However, long story short, I do have temporary custody of this child and I will do anything fit to take care of this child. The sibling is at another mother's home that I know very well, and she's a great mother as well. She works in the same field as me, so I know her very well. But I just wanted to speak on this type of situation because these type of parents are out here, and I don't know what type of drug, I don't know what type of man can cause any woman to leave their child, but I am totally disgusted at people like this that actually would call themselves mothers, right? In my opinion, these type of mothers, quote unquote, are egg donors. I could never do my kids like that at all, period, point blank. And it breaks my heart, the pain and the hurt that these children in the Kelli Bryant story and the children that I'm talking about, as well as others, have to go through. I'm just flabbergasted as to how anybody could do their child like that at the end of the day. Now, I really didn't want to talk about this story at all. However, I felt pushed to talk about this story. There's more to the story too that makes the mother look even worse. However, for the sake of the child involved, I did not want to put out too much information. The child that I'm talking about definitely wants to remain in my custody until he is an adult. I think that that's just really heartbreaking. But the reason why I'm not sharing more information is because of this child, because of the fact that I don't want to break this child's heart any more than it's already been broken. So I appreciate you guys being patient and waiting for me to go live or drop any new videos. I do apologize about the wait, but I felt like this situation needed my undivided attention at the time and still going on. I may have to slow down my lives and things like that in this situation because there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes as far as courts and things like that, and I want to make sure that I'm giving this child everything that the child needs far as emotionally and stuff like that. At the end of the day, my heart is broken about this situation, and I'm just thankful that I found out about it before it, became a different type of situation. Again, I've covered a lot of these type of cases like Kelli Bryant, and again, I'm not equating this of what I'm telling you in this story to Kelli Bryant's children, right, that were abandoned in that home of squalor and neglected and abandoned and starved and all this and that. Those kids suffered for years. However, I think that at this time it is very important for us to pay attention to not only our loved ones, but possibly the situations that may be going around you, far as your neighbors or kids, friends, and things like that. I'm just very grateful that this child confided in me. He wanted me to speak on this situation, but again, I am also holding back in respect of him and his sibling because there's things that they don't know. but I'm thankful that he was my child's friend, because at the end of the day, I may not have never known this child in order to step in and help. I hope you guys understand that there's some things that I just really can't share, but I gave you guys the basis of it. And I want to point out that there's no news article or news story clip or anything like that on this situation that I'm speaking about personally, but I want you guys to know these type of stories don't always make it on the news. I'm heartbroken, y'all. So I just wanted to share that with you guys and let you guys know that that's currently what's going on. And I encourage you guys to pay attention. As we know, the economy is crazy. These drugs that are on the streets are crazy, and children are being neglected and they're being abandoned. And I have a whole playlist of stories like Kelli Bryant's or the like that I want to touch base on, so that will give me the opportunity to drop these edits. I'm currently working from home, but at the same time, again, I kind of want to wait a little bit before I get back into the whole live streaming thing. Again, if you see me earlier than that, that means everything is going great, and to which I hope it does. But I definitely just feel like at this time, completing and doing a whole long live stream is kind of a lot right now. But Royal Family, I just wanted to kind of let you guys know what's going on, and I also wanted to cover this case. I was gonna cover this case regardless, but it did trigger me to speak about the other situation. Now y'all know that this case is fairly fresh, so it will take time for court proceedings to take place and things like that before there's possibly an update in the Kelli Bryant case. But I will be checking for updates, and I will give updates as they come out. But at the end of the day, I think that for a little bit, I don't know how long, it may be more convenient for me to just drop premieres. It may be more efficient for me. So I hope that you guys still do pull up for the premieres. But as soon as I possibly can, I will be back to, you know, chill with y'all, go live with y'all, and talk about real events that are going on. Please, you guys, protect these children. Be the eyes, you know, to peep things that don't seem right. Make sure you report them. There may be a child that needs your help, whether you know it or not, or somebody else that needs your help for that matter. But anyway, Royal Family, stay you, stay royal, stay uncompromisable, and please stay woke, because you will see me or hear my voice in an upcoming edit, and hopefully alive soon, because I miss you guys. Much love, y'all.